I dropped a serial killer off at home, multiple times. Long-time lurker, first-time posting. I hate the fact that I have a story to even post on this subreddit, but it goes to show you when living in a major metropolitan city, you never know what walks of life you'll pass by, or drop off. So, little backstory. In 2003, I was a 16-year-old employee at an urban clothing store here on the south side of Chicago. At the time, I had a manager who was in his early 20s by the name of Anthony. Anthony was pretty arrogant and obnoxious, but overall, he was a pretty cool guy. I used to kind of give him shit and tease him when it came to approaching the ladies, because he always seemed timid or too aggressive. I was, and still am, a ladies' man, so yeah, I was being an asshole. After working at his place for about 3 months, Anthony asks me if I will drop him off at home. It was far from the direction I was heading in, so I dropped him off maybe twice a week for the next month or so. Now, let me tell you, these car rides were quite uncomfortable. This guy, as much as we spoke at work, would not speak, and sort of just kept looking straight. It got to the point that his awkwardness went from entertaining, I was 16, most awkward people are interesting to teenagers, to straight creepy. Fast forward to 4 years later, I'm watching the news as they go into detail of a horrific crime committed by a Comcast installation worker. Apparently, the Comcast worker entered 2 homes he was due for an installation, raped, beat, and strangled 2 women. The real unfortunate thing is this happened on 2 different occasions, and after the first murder, the gentleman was arrested and questioned, but released and sent back to work, which allowed him to strike again. As the picture of his mugshot flashed the screen, I froze. It was Anthony. Now, growing up on the south side of Chicago, I have grown up and befriended a fair share of people who grew up to be murderers, but this took the cake. So Anthony Triplet, let's not meet, because that means I'm in jail with you. Here's a link for validation and authenticity. The day I was almost murdered while hiking on the Natches Trace. So, this is kind of a long story, but I'll try to keep it as brief as I can, while still including all the relevant info I can still remember. I was 15 at the time. I live in the South, in a town that was built along the Natches Trace. For anyone who doesn't know, the Natches Trace is a very long stretch of road that runs almost the entire length of the United States north to south. It was used by tribes way back when, to quickly get around the country for trade, and, during the Civil War, was used for both Union and Confederate soldiers for travel. It's a federally protected land now, and feels very isolated. No one is allowed to build anything within a mile of the trace. And there are no streetlights, just a 2-lane road. There are burial mounds, even unnamed Civil War graves, and lots of offshoot hiking trails. It is extremely illegal to dig up anything. In my town, it isn't uncommon to go hiking out there because it's absolutely gorgeous, but there were stories about being careful. I remember in the 90s a young woman was killed out there while hiking, and there were all these sort of boogeyman stories about not being out on the trace after dark. Hiking the trace was something that me and some friends used to do a lot when we were young. We used to go off trail often, because you can find some really cool stuff back there. One day, me and a buddy were out there going through some trails and checking stuff out like we always did. It was in the spring and not quite summer yet, but the days were starting to get longer. It wasn't super late, but later than we were usually out, just barely dusk. We were about an hour or 2 into hiking and gone off trail like usual. We came up on a break in the trees that opened up in this big open field, and there's an old truck out there. That alone was a huge red flag, because you can't use any vehicles off-road there. But there were 2 dudes next to the truck with some shovels and enough dirt next to them that you could tell they had been digging a pretty big hole for a while. The bed of the truck was open, but we couldn't see inside it from where we were. They looked at us, and there was like this weird second or 2 where no one said anything. And I don't remember who moved first, but I remember the dudes both jumping into the truck, starting it up, and driving full speed towards us. We ran back into the trees in a panic because we thought for sure they were going to run us down. I remember hearing the truck stop at the trees behind us as we ran, and hearing them get out yelling. We ran for what felt like a couple of minutes before we jumped into a deadfall of broken trees, and just stayed as quiet as we could. We could hear them a ways off and could hear dogs barking as well, like they had dogs with them. And I specifically remember hearing one of them yell at some point, "I can't see you, but I can hear you, and my dog's gonna get you." We just stayed quiet and didn't move, because we never heard them get close enough that we thought they'd spot us. Eventually, we hear the truck start again in the distance, and stayed out until we couldn't hear it anymore. And then, we carefully walked back to the car without saying a word. I still remember the whole ride home. We were quiet, and every pair of headlights we saw made me almost have a heart attack, because I thought it was gonna be them looking for us. I never found out what they were doing out there, but it must have been something bad. When I was younger, my brain always went to the obvious cliche, like someone hiding a body, mostly because it would be a good spot to do it. No one looks for stuff out there, but as I got older, I began to think that it was probably either dirty money or drug stashes. The town is small enough that I've always wondered if I've ever ran into these people again out in public and just not known it. Getting groceries or running errands. How many times have I been a car or two behind them at a stoplight? To this day, it gives me the willies. Creepy Dollar Tree man. Here in the States, we have a dollar store called Dollar Tree. My daughter used to love going in and just looking around. We were just looking around and enjoying our time and leisure. At that time, she was about 10 years old, so I'd allow her to look at things she wanted on one aisle as I looked around at the items on the end cap of that aisle, or I'd be in the very next aisle. Every few minutes, I'd go into the aisle and check on her and see if she wanted to move on to something else. Suddenly, I noticed a tall man just kind of hanging around where she was browsing, and he didn't seem to be looking at anything in particular, and honestly, not looking at anything at all. It was more like he was just waiting for someone, and it just kind of set my senses off. Gave me a strange vibe. So I went directly to where my daughter was, and stayed right next to her with my hand firmly on her. She could tell something was off, looked at me quizzically, but didn't verbally question me. I tried changing aisles but staying in the same area, but within seconds he would be right next to us in the new aisle. I quietly told my daughter to please not ask questions, but to follow me no matter what I did or where I went. Surprisingly, she did so because ordinarily she was full of questions about literally everything. She's got ASD and just likes to get info on whatever is happening. I decided I would cross the store to the far corner in the opposite direction, and you guessed it, within a minute, he was right behind us. I immediately went to another far off part of the store, and same thing. Within a minute, he was right behind us. I did this 4 or 5 different times, and each time, he ended up where we were. The stationery, the grocery area, the makeup aisle, etc. I was very nervous, but I was young, and I thought about telling an employee, but decided I didn't want to cause a scene. Again, I was a young mom. At some point, I told my daughter the basics of what was going on, and told her to understand that under no circumstances to leave my side or let go of me. I was so freaked out, I just decided we'd check out and come back another day. Well, as soon as we got in line to check out, the man got in the line at the register next to me, and it seemed as though it was because that line had roughly the same amount of people, and perhaps he wanted to leave the store as we were leaving. The second we finished checking out, he headed straight for the door. I told my daughter to take my hand and not to let go no matter what, and again, she did exactly what I said without question. I told her when we get to the car, immediately get in and lock your door while I get in, and she did so. I chanced to look back, and yes, the man was coming right behind us, but far enough away that as we were walking very quickly, we had time to get in the car without him catching up. We lived down the street from the store, but I took a very scenic route home to make sure I wasn't being followed. I don't know what his intentions were, but it felt sinister whether it was or not. To this day, my daughter brings this story up every now and then, and it's been almost 20 years since it happened, and I still get sick to my stomach when I think about it. Whatever he actually wanted, I hope to never be in this situation again. So, to the creepy Dollar Tree man, let's not meet again. How I learned my dad is a badass motherfucker. This story takes place in 1977. The cast of characters includes my mom, my dad, my brother, and of course, the serial killer. My brother was little at the time and had been at a friend's house. I don't remember what the occasion was. but my parents were picking him up. It was late at night and winter. My parents pick my brother up, load him into the car, and start driving home. As they're leaving the neighborhood to get onto the main road, they see a man come out of the woods with a shotgun and get into his van on the side of the road. Now, the area I grew up in was suburban, but the folks can be rather redneck. Seeing someone come out of the woods with a shotgun is worrisome, but usually just means it was a poacher. Dad just keeps driving. The man gets into his car and follows my parents onto the main road. Still, nothing to be worried about. But they make it a few turns on the way home, and it becomes increasingly obvious that the van was following them. They pulled into the housing plan we lived in, which was mostly new construction, and the van pulls into the plan behind them. At the time, our house was the only finished and occupied house on our little cul-de-sac. The streetlights hadn't even been turned on yet. It was pitch black, winter, cold, and isolated. The van pulls into our driveway behind my dad. This is when my dad gets out the car, sends my mom and my brother into the house, and tells them to lock the door. He waits till they get inside, and then he walks up to the van, stands at the nose of the car, and just stares at the man inside. He waits, with no questions, no bravado, no nothing. He just stands there and waits, intimidatingly. Now, what you need to know about my father at the time, he had a full-ride scholarship for football in college, but he dropped out and decided it would be fun to join the military and volunteer to go to Vietnam instead, because he was bored. He spent a year on some godforsaken little island at a ranger camp. He was an intimidating man, and always has been. Without being overly tall or large, he has a presence. You just don't want to fuck with him. He's now much older and somewhat overweight, but in 1977, he must have been something, because without any words being exchanged, the man put his van into reverse and just drove away. The story doesn't end there though. The next morning, it was all over the news. A man had been murdered the night before, in the housing plan my parents picked my brother up from, just a street away. A man had been shot through his living room window with a shotgun and died on the floor while his wife tried to flee, with the kids asleep upstairs. The wife leads the man through the woods on a chase, and they find her body a few hours later in the woods, the same area where my family saw the man come out. And as it turns out, it was Edward Surratt, the serial killer. He followed me through my own apartment complex at night. I live in a managed complex that has 2 buildings. The main one, with the lobby, mailroom, amenities, etc., and the secondary one, which I currently live in. On Sunday night, I had a DoorDash delivery dropped off. I always tell them they can drop off my orders at the secondary entrance in my building so that I don't have to cross over to the main building, but I don't think they ever read the note. No worries. I read the notification from DoorDash and saw it got delivered to the lobby in the main building around 11 p.m. I made my way over, and I noticed my dasher even left a note saying there was a suspicious man in the lobby and that he was worried he might take my food. Figured he said this because he was waiting until I got there. When I came down, there really was a guy sitting there on his phone, but carefully watching my food. He saw me approaching and said, "You're here." To which I responded, "Thanks for waiting." Must be the DoorDasher. I picked up my order and started to turn around, and he also got up, except he started heading in the direction of the elevators, not the exit. Then he starts chatting. "I actually live in this building. My name's... and I live in building number... What's your name?" I give him a fake name and cut the conversation short, the pieces coming together in my mind. This wasn't the DoorDasher. It was the suspicious man pretending to be the Dasher, and who had even waited for me to come down as though he made the delivery. To get back to my building, the secondary one, you can either use the elevators in the main building to the 4th floor and transfer to the secondary building, or you can cut across the garage in the main building to the 2nd building. I noticed the key fob in his hand and waited for him to click the elevator and step inside. When I gathered he was taking the elevator and knew I definitely didn't want to share an elevator with him so he would know where I lived, I decided I would take the shortcut through the garage. It's a straight line and maybe a 2-minute walk to the other side. After he stepped in the elevator, I walked through both sets of doors and into the garage, my senses heightened. Halfway through, I decided to look behind me to verify I was alone, only to see his body in the doorway. He hadn't taken the elevator. He was following me. I booked it, heart racing through the garage doors. I started jamming the elevator buttons, hoping it would come quickly, but I could hear the elevator car was still on its way down. In a split second, I tried to think if I would be strong enough to hold down the door with the weight of my body if he came pushing through, but that would mean we would be stuck in this area in the garage, with probably little to no cameras or cell service. I was running out of time. I eyed the stairwell and, carrying my food, booked it 2 steps at a time up 2 floors. I was now on the 4th floor, which is normally the floor you would transfer on to get to the other building, although I was now in the secondary building, my building. I was worried if he indeed was following me, he'd know which building I lived in, so I needed to go back to the main building. If he was still behind me, I would know for sure he was following me, because we just did a circle. From the corner of my eye in the distance, I could see somebody taking out their trash from the reflection of the door. At 11 p.m., this was the first person I'd seen, and I needed to be next to anyone. So I cut through the courtyard, through the conservatory, and into the hallway of the 4th floor in the main building. Just as I stopped to catch my breath, he busted through the conservatory door and caught up to me, huffing and puffing. He accused me of stealing the DoorDash, yelling, got in my face, and told me that I could be evicted and sent to prison. I couldn't look him in the eyes for longer than 3 seconds, but he looked bewildered. At this point, the person taking out their trash to the chute was nowhere to be seen, and this man kept coming closer, me backing up, with him inching closer. I tried talking loudly, hoping if anything were to happen, the residents in the unit behind me could hear, but he continued to raise his voice, claiming that the number 119 order on the receipt stapled outside the bag was the real person's apartment number, and that I had stolen it from them. Taking a look, number 119 was in fact the order number, not the apartment number, but he was convinced it was someone's apartment unit number. For a lot of reasons, this logic didn't make sense, but this implied. Not that I needed to explain it to him, but I could have been trying to go to the main building, 2nd building, 4th floor, main building, 2nd floor to lose him, so that we didn't have to share the elevator and he'd know where I lived. Even if I was taking someone else's order, I wasn't. He was going to follow me up to my apartment to verify where I lived, scary, and ensure my apartment matched the number, that he assumed was the apartment number, on the bag. He was able to catch up to me relatively quickly, considering I was sprinting and out of breath. This means he was deliberately following/chasing me down, which as a man, circumstances aside, but especially for the rationale of stolen food, I'm not sure why you would ever willingly chase a woman by herself at night, knowing how this would look for him. He was also studying my order/receipt, because you had to be in close proximity to the receipt to see that the fading ink read 119. And it was never about the order, because why did he pretend to go to the elevator in the beginning, only to chase me across 2 buildings for an order? He didn't even know what apartment number I was going into, and it definitely dawned on him that up until that point, we were the only people around. As I was standing there, him inching near me and poking the receipt, I thought I heard someone coming through the hallway in the distance. He clicked the elevator button, continuing his threats, and I didn't even wait for him to finish getting on the elevator. I sprinted through the conservatory, through the courtyard, and back to my building, taking the elevator up to my floor. I got in my apartment, paralyzed and shaking from what I thought was the end of that night. I was so terrified that my breathing got labored and raspy. I don't even have asthma, but I could barely catch my breath for minutes, grasping onto anything I could so that I could feel grounded and not choke from the lack of air. I'll never forget the moment I looked back in that garage and saw his body in the doorframe. I wrote a long detailed email to my management with screenshots from the DoorDash and exact accounts on the locations of where everything happened, so that they could corroborate my account with the camera footage. It's been 4 days and I'm awoken every morning by my heart racing, hot flashes, and paranoia, with every drop of a sound. This is a new kind of anxiety I've never felt before, and my days are clouded with fears of bumping into him in common spaces. How to plan my days with the highest likelihood of avoiding him? and how to strategically order and pick up my mail where I know I won't have to see him. I don't know if these extreme symptoms, especially the heart racing, are normal after this experience, considering I know a lot of women have had more frightening and violent encounters with strangers that involve more than what happened to me that night, but this has been consuming me for the past few days. I feel unsafe in my own building. Let's not meet. Ever. Edit. Everything that has happened since the next morning. My management and maintenance came knocking on my door. Of course, I was extremely frazzled from the events of the night before, and although I opened the door, they could see I was visibly shaken. They came to apologize about the events, saying they had seen the footage and it was scary. I needed to file a police report immediately. The property manager was kind, saying he would sit and call the police with me so that I wouldn't have to do it alone. I asked if he knew the resident and if they were aware. He said they knew who he was, and that this wasn't the first time he had been reported for bothering a resident. My stomach sank. I quickly got ready and met the property manager downstairs, outside our building, but away from the areas my property manager has known to see him hanging near, and we made the call together. After I gave my account, the property manager chimed in with his accounts of what happened. I was the 4th or 5th female he had harassed. He has harassed women in the complex before, but never followed them at night. The property manager has managed multiple properties before, but he has never seen a resident following another resident like this. He usually finds a woman by herself and kinda hones in on them. He doesn't approach men, and he doesn't approach women when they were with men. The people who live on his floor have complained numerous times that he harasses them, making it bothersome for them. He's also been arrested for harassing women before, and has been sent to the hospital for his mental health issues. He had been recently booked and released 2 weeks ago, and management wasn't even aware that he was back. The responder on the other line noted this was quite severe, so they sent an officer on the scene to collect an official report. By this point, as we were talking, I learned the resident's full name, birthday, unit number that he lives in, and when he moved in. It's been less than half a year, so assuming he has a 12-month lease, he still has a ways to go. The officer asked if I could remember if he had a tool or weapon in his hands, but I said I couldn't remember, and not that I knew of. I said there was camera footage, so we could check and see if he did, but the officer said even if I couldn't remember, and it turns out the perpetrator did in fact have a weapon, I cannot go back on my word and say there was a weapon and felt threatened. I was stunned. I told the officer, but there's evidence of him following me, a woman alone, as well as threatening me across 2 buildings, one of which he had no business being in at 11 p.m. at night. The officer asked if he used the words, "I will kill you" or "I will shoot you." I said no, but he was still threatening me. The officer said, unfortunately, that qualifies as being a nuisance, but being a nuisance isn't against the law/grounds for arrest. My heart dropped. On top of that, my property manager said they've been trying to evict him, but there isn't enough evidence, and eviction is a long process. There was nothing they could do. The officer gave me his card with my case number, informing me that I should call him if he ever approached me again, or if I felt unsafe. I went back to my apartment, stunned, and trying to figure out my next steps. I decided not to leave my apartment again out of safety, but ordered additional self-defense items, including an apartment doorbell camera, because he had been up close to my receipt bag to know my order number. The receipt also had my name. I was worried he would put 2 and 2 together, and type my name in the directory outside our building and figure out my unit number. I couldn't risk running into him again, so I had to stay locked up until my camera arrived. Given the information I had about him now, I decided to do my own research and find his public records. To my surprise, I learned that he actually has 6 court cases since 2018, and the most recent court record was from August 2024. His cases have been for stalking, harassment, restraining orders, multiple reissued anti-harassment protection orders, domestic violence, and attempting to get him to surrender his firearms, to which he has refused. Different women have attempted to serve him protection orders multiple times, but failed, either because he's tried to dodge it, never showed up to court, or he's been hard to get a hold of. I couldn't believe it. This man was able to freely move around common spaces in our complex, and management has never mentioned anything to residents nor regarded our safety. Now, I knew this was more than just an annoying neighbor, but rather someone who could be dangerous. I was dealing with a man with unresolved mental health issues, who may still be in possession of his multiple firearms, who is angry with me. Given his history of professional stalking, I was worried if he saw me too soon again, he would remember our encounter and fixate on me and possibly escalate. A few days passed and I hadn't left my building, but I noted that my camera had arrived, so I was trying to arrange for how I could go into the mailroom, which is the building he lives in and the floor he's on. I asked management for footage of our encounter, and after 2 days of dragging on the request, it seemed like they were trying to buy time. They finally sent me clips of our encounter in different areas. In one of the videos, you could see he followed me into the garage a bit after I had already gone in, after he supposedly pretended to take the elevator. In the clip that freaks me out the most, you could see me enter the garage elevator lobby, click the elevator button, frantically pace back and forth, and try leaning my body against the door before I realize I'm running out of time, and run through to the stairwell. A few moments later, you see him come in, look at the pressed elevator button, then deduce that I must have taken the stairwell before following suit. If anything, this showed intent. Oddly enough, the footage where he caught up to me and poked the receipt on my bag was missing, but management sent the footage after, when I run back to my building. Anyways, a few days later around 6 p.m., I was figuring out how to pick up my mail. I have a married friend who lives in his building 3 floors above, so I asked if she would be comfortable meeting me on the 4th floor of her building, where the encounter took place, and where I have to pass in order to get to the mailroom in the main lobby. So deep breaths, and I got to the end of my hallway, with my friend on the phone the whole time, and opened the door to the courtyard. Hypervigilant, I looked across the conservatory and saw a man there. I squinted. It couldn't be, but it was indeed him, standing in the conservatory. He locked eyes with me, started mouthing things, smiling and then yelling. I began shaking, uncontrollably crying, and ran back into my building. Now he knew for sure I lived in the 2nd building. My friend was in the hallway behind him, so she witnessed everything as he was yelling and directed at me. She wasn't with her husband either, but he had locked eyes with me and was angry now. There were some people in the hallway frantically asking if I was okay, but I couldn't speak. My friend, still on the line, told me to go back to my apartment, and that she would meet me there with her husband. My friend and her husband came up a few moments later, staying with me as I frantically packed the go bag. We decided it wasn't safe for me to be alone in my apartment, so I reached out to another friend who lives elsewhere in this city, who said I could crash at her place. My friend and her husband escorted me through the hallway, with me physically breaking down as we neared the elevators, but eventually leading me to my other friend's car. As I write this edit, I'm in the living room of her apartment for the 3rd day, figuring out my next moves. On my first day at my friend's house, I wrote management an email again, explaining the incident with the resident. This is my 2nd day with no response from them still. My friend went to management with her husband to report the incident since she had also witnessed him yelling, so that it could add to their complaints. But she said management was aware of me and my complaints, and that they couldn't do anything because he's protected under the Fair Housing Act. Management cannot deny housing to someone due to their disability, which includes mental illness. For context, most buildings in my city are MFTE units, basically reduced rent apartments that are reserved as part of an affordable housing program in my city. From what I can understand, people can qualify for MFTE housing based on income, and sometimes it's combined with disability protections, which is likely how he's been able to stay here. So it seems my unit is worried if they evict him, he might be able to sue for discriminatory eviction. I don't have a male partner either, which seems to be the only deterrent from the resident. So my sister and her husband are trying to figure out when they can fly in and help me pack my place, so I can get out of there. I'm devastated because it's a beautiful complex with incredible amenities, a gorgeous interior, and pretty new. But all this means nothing when my safety is at risk. I have no plans to go back to my unit until I have protection at all times in that building.